welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a really nice, enjoyable lunch. I've been really looking forward to this session. We have a really heavyweight panel of people today to discuss the whole area of digital manufacturing. So I'm going to introduce each of the participants and then hand over to the chairman of the discussion panel. So first up, we have Rab Scott, who's the chair of this discussion panel. Rab's professor of industrial digitalization at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Center at the University of Sheffield. We have Sarah Walker, who's the director of BT Enterprise Business in the Midlands and the north of England. We have Oliver Swift, who's manufacturing engineering team leader at BAE Systems. And we have Stephen Carter, who's a digital manufacturing integration systems technical specialist at Rolls-Royce. So I figure if there's anything to know about manufacturing, the knowledge sits a lot within this particular panel of participants. So on that note, Rab, I'll just hand over to you.
Mike, thank you, and welcome to all the viewers for this closing session of the Tommy Flowers Network conference, the Smart Connected Manufacturing Conference. And it gives me great pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists. So, Smart Connected Manufacturing. Sarah, what makes manufacturing smart and connected?
Thank you, Rob. So I guess I bring a slightly different perspective to the panel this afternoon. And for me, not the expert in manufacturing, but if I talk about what makes things smart and connected, the difference here really is that, smart connected manufacturing is about emerging technologies coming together in a converged ecosystem that transforms business operations, supply and value chains, and enhances customer experience. And that is delivered through ubiquitous network applications. It's augmenting AI, big data analytics, and security. So it's really about that ecosystem coming together and how we use the analytics that overlay that ecosystem to transform manufacturing from being just connected to being a smart environment.
Excellent. Ollie, from BAE's perspective, what makes manufacturing smart? What will make manufacturing smart and connected?
Yeah, we've got a number of initiatives undergo. So looking at smart tooling, smart benches, smart cranes, robotic assembly, and again, as Sarah mentioned, the whole ecosystem and underpinning all those kinds of technologies with a reliable, stable connectivity as well. So, like I say, going forward, all these form part of the ecosystem, which will become the smart manufacturing of the future.
Thank you. And Stephen, you're the smart factory specialist within Rolls-Royce. So how does smart connected manufacturing impact the smart factory, and what makes it smart and connected? Just trying to level up this question for everyone.
I think from a personal perspective, it's kind of we talked about Industry 4, couldn't we? I suppose we could have called this Smart Manufacturing an Industry 4 discussion, but the reality of both of those kind of tight statements is cyber physical systems, or sometimes I call physical cyber systems, and it's the true integration of kind of the traditional, say Industry 3.99 in terms of the raw process, understanding the raw process, the data associated with that, and also taking it to another level, using the ecosystem as a good example of that. But in terms of manufacturing is part of the big cog, isn't it? In terms of there's still engineering, design, manufacturing, assembly, and in product operation, and manufacturing, smart connected manufacturing is about being part of that bigger digital and product thread, really. So it's not just smart connected manufacturing in my mind, it's the whole product life cycle, which manufacturing can add an element of enhancements and insights to the whole experience.
Okay, staying with you, Stephen. So you've given us the feeling there that you're not just talking about a single phase within a life cycle, it's the whole life cycle, essentially. What are the enablers that need to be in place to actually make this a reality? Because that's a very different vision from where we are today.
It is, and I think our types of sector in terms of aerospace and defence sectors certainly have more structured viewpoint on kind of in-service feedback, for instance, of operational components, operational products, and manufacturing as part of that sort of digital thread, really. So having data standards, adopting standards both in manufacturing and from the overall product life cycle is really important. And defence and civil aerospace is very much kind of driven by even by service contracts, if that makes sense, in terms of that sort of interoperability at the back end of the product, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. So one of the big things that you said there, Stephen, was about the connectivity, the interoperability, essentially dependencies on the communication layers. So Sarah, just what enablers are needed within the communications field, within the connectivity field, to actually to make the smart connected factory, smart connected manufacturing a reality?
So I think actually, the infrastructure now is not just an enabler, but could be a catalyst for Industry 4.0. And as you look at the sort of smart connected ecosystem, a lot of that is driving the computation away from the core and into the edge of networks. 5G becomes a huge catalyst for that because of the low latency and speeds and the bandwidth. And I think what you find then is that a lot of that computation is moved into the smart devices that are at the edge of that network. And then we talk about the volume of things that are ultimately connected in that manufacturing environment and how you enable them to detail insights far quicker, allow real-time analytics, allow real-time decisions to be made that improve those operations. So 5G is a huge catalyst for that because of the low latency and the high bandwidth that is available, within that infrastructure. And I think, again, that's when we talk about the types of devices that you can then connect. I think, Ollie, you talked about smart tooling, smart benches, none of which I profess to be an expert on, but it is infrastructure such as 5G and private networks that enable that type of end product to be connected to these networks in far more agile and cohesive ways.
I think that the agility and mobility of this sort of equipment is going to be key in the manufacturing establishments of the future. And in fact, I know, Ollie, that up at BA Systems, you're really looking at the future factory and with these connected devices. What sort of enablers do we need to allow those connected devices to actually reveal and deliver their full potential?
Yeah, so I think one of our key issues at present is the current and the future IT setups. It struggles to address the manufacturing needs, whereas the operational technology predominantly is handled by engineers, and there's very little standardization. For example, our standard IT infrastructures aren't designed to handle production critical networks in terms of latency, reliability and scalability and so on. So if you look carefully at OT, it's quite diverse and bespoke for different purposes. Another one of the challenges is manufacturing is a complex puzzle of downstream and upstream suppliers working in sync. It requires a lot of exchanging, lots of data. It's something we struggle with for various reasons, particularly when it comes to real-time data. This is where we see 5G as navigating those obstacles, such as latency, bandwidth, scalability, and reliability, and really investigating how we apply this new level of technology.
So, all panelists, we've really then just discussed the enablers that need to be in place to make that smart connect manufacturing reality. One of the things you mentioned there was about interoperability, but the requirement to have standards. So is that a reality? I mean, or are we just hoping for standards?
No, I think standards have always been there. I think there was a survey done about 3 years ago, that looked at between IEC and ISO, and they concluded there was 3,500 standards out there that kind of fitted into the smart manufacturing space, of which some were duplicated, conflicted with each other, or just weren't well promoted. But certainly as we go into an Industry 4 world now, there's still plenty more that standards can actually offer to actually be a real catalyst for maybe the final, not say the final, but real next step changes in the smart manufacturing space in terms of data connectivity, security, and information interoperability. So I think that there's still some good stuff there. I think everybody. I think when you look at kind of the demographic of kind of any country or in their industrial sector or sectors, is that everybody's at a different sort of point on their maturity, aren't they? You know, some industrialists, maybe larger ones, have adopted digital technologies and IT to the nth degree in Industry 3.99 world, whereas others may have kind of lagged a bit. Whereas, you know, you've got startups that are going straight in at the top end, aren't they? So I think everybody's at their different maturity on terms of where they are. Certainly recognising the benefits of connectivity and digitalisation is key, isn't it? You know, and we're not talking about sort of data capture, data presentation, and visualisation. You know, we're now talking about more interactive kind of in-depth analytics, both process within a shop floor, or within factories, or even to the wider product life cycle, aren't we? So standards can be a real key there for interoperability. And the trouble is, it's very complicated, isn't it? Because manufacturing cuts across a number of different, standards alone. You know, you talk about IEC for machines, you know, control systems first, to ISO, which has a bit of interest in that, but they're more interested in the enterprise or smart manufacturing space and other aspects. Then you've got safety as well, haven't you, as well, and you've got connectivity like 5G and robotics. You know, they're all different sort of divisions of standards and domain topics. But it's a challenge to integrate those. But, you know, with good foresight, I think you can make a big difference to the supply chain.
So just staying with you, Stephen. You said that standards are a challenge, especially with many companies being at different levels of maturity. How can we start to address that and start to overcome that challenge?
I think obviously some people, you know, I think the trick is obviously, you know, take more of a system engineering approach and the integration approach to, if you're going to launch into a new factory or a new program, as opposed to just sort of be maybe just focused on the technology to make a successful technology deployment. I think, you know, there's always been, you know, kind of Industry 3.99 sort of ISO 95 standards on how a business operates and its data stack and a pyramid, you know, from level 0 to level 4. You know, there's a myriad of different other kind of architectural kind of models in the world of how Industry 4 should work. But there's also some nice standards coming out. Well, technical report standards from IEC are coming out shortly on talking about smart manufacturing. They've laid out three parts to this, and one of them includes terms and references for smart manufacturing. One is use cases, and one is cybersecurity considerations. So I think it doesn't give you an answer, for instance, but, you know, those types of documents will be good educational documents, quite in-depth documents, and kind of sets more of a broad kind of terms of reference of standard, even terms, because, you know, terms, what is Industry 4, what is cyber physical systems, you know, it can be mismarketed or misunderstood by various end users, can't it? So I think they're quite positive enablers, really, in trying to bring everybody's education up, which I know is another aspect we talk about later, isn't it? So.
Absolutely. And Sarah, the education of people around the benefits of the communications layer, especially as we go towards 5G, and the cybersecurity related to that, you know, what challenges do we have to overcome there?
Yeah, I think cybersecurity is probably an industry agnostic challenge in the UK at the moment, Rob, and as we accelerate so much towards digital transformation in all industries, not least manufacturing, the maturity of our cybersecurity plans becomes more and more important. And I think the awareness and the understanding of how data travels around networks, the access that we have as a result of the advent of technologies such as 5G, and the responsibilities that we have to protect that data as it travels across the networks is really, really important. And we are seeing more and more now the role of a CISO being as important and significant as the role of a CTO in large organisations. And I think, you know, the ability to develop and mature your cyber plans in parallel to your technology and your infrastructure plans are so important. And when we start to think about I know we are going to come on to the discussion of big data, but that is a really significant part of that whole debate, is how we secure and manage the flow of data across networks, and that will be no different for organisations across the manufacturing industry.
Ollie, the flow of data within BA Systems is absolutely critical. And, you know, recently we've seen the Prime Minister standing beside the smart workbench with a smart tool. What challenges do you face with those devices? Is it about the maturity of the devices? Is it about your understanding of how to use the devices and capture the devices? Perhaps you can just elaborate slightly.
Yeah, as you say, Rob, you know, as we go to more in-depth levels of autonomy, the devices are going to be capturing certain amounts of that data and feeding that into your ERP systems. The understanding and the reliance of how that data is stored and classified and ultimately shared, we need to start fostering a culture of security with increased awareness of the data, the connectivity, and have a solid policy to back that up. And as Stephen said, you know, movement towards increased data share, legislation will also have to evolve to support this new digital paradigm as well.
So how are you actually addressing, and this may come out, integration and I suppose the interfacing of legacy systems? Is that a challenge that we've got to overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. When you use the term legacy systems, it's I see that as sort of the siloed off operational technology and all these things that aren't traditionally connected into the factory ecosystem, if you want to call it that. We're moving towards both. You still need to use that legacy equipment as well as the future new technology. So there's a whole host of different ways to connect, and like I say, the standardization of that connectivity is going to be crucial.
Thank you. One of the big challenges that we hear from manufacturers these days is around the skills pipeline, both for the manufacturers of the future, but also around reskilling and upskilling the existing workforce. Stephen, how can we overcome that? How can we actually influence the curriculum so that the future engineers, the future manufacturers are coming out with the correct skill sets? And do we know what those skill sets are?
I think everybody uses the word digital native, doesn't it, as a key thing. But I think, you know, what you mentioned before, if everybody should be kind of a digital native in the future, whatever role they're doing, and it's kind of becomes part of the makeup of a well-rounded engineer or wherever you are working in a business. But but so, you know, certainly, you know, BA Systems and ourselves, Rolls-Royce, you know, we're very advocates of trying to promoting STEM, you know, science, technology, and engineering, maths type topics through schools, through apprenticeships and degree programs. So we try and kind of influence curriculum at all stages, really. We're a central team which have been doing this for a number of years, and we have, you know, certainly bespoke degree programs, you know, apprentice degree programs, where we do obviously very much work with the academic institutes on that curriculum, and through to likes of MSCs as well. So it's about working with academia directly on those specific programs, and in trying to encourage a general good, broad, relevant, broad skill set and learning from our intakes at whatever levels.
So Sarah, BT, I know, invests an awful lot in the education of its workforce and its employees. How does BT actually influence the curriculum to make sure it's getting the right skills coming through from not just higher education, but further education, even down to secondary and primary education?
And actually, Rob, I think it's the secondary and primary where UK-wide we have the biggest problem, and we have the biggest opportunity to influence and encourage more pupils at that age to be more energised by STEM subjects. You find that the progression from secondary education into STEM apprenticeships, degrees, or you know, higher education is pretty low, and particularly in females. So I actually think that both the Department for Education and organisations such as BT, manufacturing organisations through, you know, local reach out programmes, it is through that primary secondary education that we have the biggest opportunity to improve the future intakes of individuals interested in these sectors. And I think, in how we can influence that, there's a number of programs that BT have done, such as our Barefoot program, where we go out to primary and secondary schools. We work with teachers on how to better educate on STEM type subjects, digital skills. And again, maybe there's a role to do actually in that level of workforce, primary and secondary school teachers, and getting them to be advocates for more STEM type activities. So that Barefoot for us is a big piece. And then, as many organisations are now, really focusing on apprenticeships. We're seeing a lot more children now go from secondary education into apprenticeships rather than higher education. And our responsibility to be really proactive in supporting children at that age and bringing them into industrial placements is hugely important. And I think the more we work with Department for Education on encouraging more vocational subjects at secondary level, I know particularly in the Midlands there are some vocational colleges now that you can go to study GCSEs specific to manufacturing, which are sponsored by JLR and Aston Martin, for example, in the Midlands, and things like that start to encourage better uptake at a younger age, better interest and intrigue in what is a fascinating area, but there's still an awful lot to do, Rob.
It's interesting that you actually identify, digital skills as a separate entity. Should we be teaching them as a separate entity, or should they just be embedded in the curriculum?
They should be embedded in the curriculum, but at this point in time, my honest observation is the curriculum is still quite traditional, and digital skills is almost a separate subject. It should be, I think, Stephen, you mentioned, that this should be part of our DNA. As we move forward, regardless of what industry or roles you move into, digital skills are an absolute prerequisite in any industry. But if you look at the curriculum in its purest form at the moment, it is effectively a subject in its own right.
Thank you. Ollie, BAE Systems, huge employer, especially in the northwest of England. How do you actually influence the curriculum locally? I know that you work with local employers, you work with the, obviously, not just BAE Systems, but the whole supply chain. How do you ensure that you get the right skills coming through?
Yeah, similar to as Stephen mentioned, we use the STEM projects in reaching into the primary and secondary schools. We've got the Academy for Skills and Knowledge over at the Samlesbury Enterprise Zone, from young engineers to early careers and various graduate schemes. Under the banner of Factory of the Future, there's a lot. It's not just a focus on technology, but also development of skills for the future and engineering for the future. Under that banner, we actually collaborate with a lot of stakeholders, working closely with 5 strategic universities, with bringing their own different perspectives, the high-value manufacturing capital research centres, such as the AMRC, and really, there's the other Made Smarter initiative, the UK government initiative, also starting to address manufacturing capability in the UK. With the sights on future skills and leadership, and that's reaching into the supply chains, the other manufacturing sectors, and other, not only manufacturing but pharmaceutical, automotive, and all those kinds of different manufacturing sectors, should I say.
So one of the things that we get constantly messaged from most manufacturing sectors is that, yes, they want people with digital skills, but they also want methods to upskill the existing workforce, or maybe even to remove some of the heavy lifting and put it into systems. So, for instance, Ollie, I know that you up in Salisbury and Wharton, you've got the smart workbenches where you've actually systematized some of the knowledge so that the employee actually understands how to use the system, but the system holds the knowledge of the product. Do you see that probably going to become the way that the existing workforce is going to be upskilled in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Take me as an example. I did the Advanced Modern Apprenticeship, it was called, back in 2001, and we didn't touch digital skills. It wasn't something that was on the curriculum. Going forward, that's going to change. Like I say, Rab, we do bring the workforce in to the Factory of the Future and collaborate with them on how these things are going to be integrated into the production lines, and understand, how they are going to use this, and really take what was a sort of a 2D method into more of a 3D collaborative approach, and cobotics, and trying to really integrate the people with the technology, as opposed to just rolling out a bunch of technology into the shop floor environment with very little integration. That's not the way that we're going to succeed with this new level of digitization.
So from what you just said there, I think that stakeholder engagement with the shop floor workforce or the existing workforce to help upskill them is absolutely critical. Sarah, what sort of tools, techniques, methodologies does BT actually employ to actually use that? Is it using things like augmented reality, remote support? Over the last 12 months, we've all been doing a level of remote support. Okay, it's been called Zoom meetings, but and this is all about the communications layer. So tell us about BT's experience in that field.
Yeah, so again, Rob, the last 12 months has definitely accelerated people's perceptions of what remote and immersive learning can and should look like. And I think one of the best examples of what we're doing in the education sector is the immersive classroom that we launched up in Scotland just a few weeks ago, which starts to really look at that opportunity to use augmented reality in the classroom, and again, create that better level of energy and engagement with young students. And that's something that can be rolled out in the business context as well. We've also done a number of programs around Digital Boost and Google Garage, which is probably more oriented towards the SME part of our organisation, but looking again at how we use different virtual, remote and immersive technologies to support SMEs through their own digital skills gaps and give them some guidance and access to tools and collateral that perhaps organisations of that size wouldn't ordinarily have. And then using the power of technology, as I say, not only as an enabler, but as more of a catalyst, and starting to think about how they use their infrastructure in smarter and more collaborative ways to engage, whether that be their workforce or their end customers in smarter and more innovative ways.
Stephen, Rolls-Royce, I know, is a global corporation or a global company, because headquartered in the UK, so I suppose it's company, not corporation, spread across the UK, but also in places like Singapore and over in the States. How have you actually been using technology and the connectivity behind manufacturing to do that knowledge transfer and the upskilling of your workforce?
Well, I mean, obviously we use digital technologies like this for conference calls and running meetings. I mean, we've done like a number of proof of concepts, certainly in manufacturing on the other side of the world, like in Singapore, where we've done virtual sort of agile approach to defining requirements through to actually in preparation to actually doing a proof of concept and then going to site to do it. So we've kind of done a hybrid really, and we've also adopted, going back on Sarah's point, we've used like mixed reality type technologies in the last 12 months in our end products as well, in terms of training, where certainly at certain points in the pandemic where training was obviously required in the field for engines, etc., we've actually used mixed reality as well in terms of to the other end of the spectrum. So
I just have to admit, I remember seeing mixed reality on the Microsoft HoloLens down at the Farnborough Air Show. I think it was probably in 2018 or something like that. Really impressive. But within that, there's actually a challenge in that you need to create content. You need to put that content and connect it or communicate it with a device. So really, the fundamentals of smart connected manufacturing, as Sarah and Ollie have said previously, is around data and the movement of data. So it's the right data to the right person at the right time to make informed insights and decisions. We're moving to a phase where we're going to be expected to or want to share more data. Is industry ready for that? Because data's so often been seen as its, that's its golden goose, that's its IP, and you don't want to share that more widely if you don't have to. What are your considerations on that, Stephen?
Yeah, I think from a personal perspective, obviously the supply chain is another source of information as well in terms of what that brings back into our finished products, and that's no different challenge for anybody else really. And I think, and there's obviously the internal challenges as well. So I mean, again going on the maturity of people where they are with their data and their data systems. You might have quality data, process data, operational data, machine status data. Through you might have systems that are collecting that data today, but it's kind of like how you actually create a platform that kind of removes the barriers, isn't it, between all those data sets and possible correlations, etc., and then through to the overall end product in service. So I think from an architectural perspective, it's an easy thing to say, but there's obviously challenges on how you join those together, particularly when you consider, particularly both Rolls-Royce and BAE Systems have, civil aerospace stroke air defence products as well. So there comes a lot of caveats in terms of how you manage your data from a information security and its classification perspective. So it's not quite an easy task. You have to go through a lot of process to where you may host that data, how you're processing that data, and the access to that data generally, whether that's from an end customer perspective, supply chain, or internally. So we probably have an additional level of complication in some respects.
Ollie, you must have the same challenges. Is there a mindset change that's going on within the industry to be more open to data sharing where legislation allows it?
Yeah, I think you're right, and we have the same synergies with Rolls-Royce as all manufacturing sectors do. We are all facing very similar challenges, and I don't think so. Sometimes it's using the technology to overcome those challenges, but also it's the IP can come in where you actually apply that technology. So the technology can be the same, the problem can be the same, but how you actually address the challenge of your individual business need is where the IP comes in, I think. And then, like you say, Rab, the mindset of understanding this and like Stephen said, really categorizing this and how you classify your data is where that understanding needs to increase. And again, like I said earlier, there needs to be a solid policy to back that up as well, to make sure that your data is protected and you are moving forward with a solid plan.
Sarah, working in the enterprise part of BT, you must have seen a huge move towards more data sharing throughout the supply chain. Is it still sharing really, or do you think there's a reticence to move towards true openness and transparency?
I think there is a reticence balanced with an awareness that there is probably a necessity to start to be more open and transparent with data sharing, Rob, for the greater good, I guess, of UK PLC, and it all goes down to again the cognizance of the security and the ethics and that sit behind that, dependent on the type of data that we're looking to share. I think the real challenge is that you've got the SMEs who are sort of grappling with how they do that on an independent basis versus larger organisations who have, the partnerships, the budgets and the opportunities to work with the larger big data hyperscalers to understand what big data really means to them, start to build the business cases for how that can be better utilised to improve their operations. So I think there is and should be a move towards probably a more federated approach to sharing data and understanding how collectively, industry-wide, that creates more of an opportunity than it does a risk. And I think that's the balance that most organisations are grappling with at the moment. Well, what's the opportunity versus the risk of sharing that data and that insight, and how far do you extend that, as you say, across that supply chain and that sort of partner ecosystem for the benefit of not only your organisation independently, but the industry more widely.
Something you said in your answer there, and thank you for that, Sarah, just triggered a thought. As we share more data and hopefully we deliver and develop insights and value out of it, how do we actually control the monetization of somebody else's data? You know, and is there a legislative process that we need to go through to actually get the legislation, the regulatory bodies aligned with this opportunity that we get from big data?
Most definitely, and I think, you know, as more organisations adopt Industry 4.0, we've got more connected things. That legislation and that policy control, I guess, will become quite iterative, Rob, because there will be an explosion between now and 2025, and a lot of what will need to be governed or controlled is probably as yet unknown. So as we see that, you know, increased adoption, as we see more and more connected things, and that transfer of data and organisations working collaboratively in terms of sharing those insights, I think legislation will need to keep up and evolve with that. Policy control will need to adapt as we see just how far that concept of smart connected manufacturing, you know, can and will go.
Stephen, the monetization of data also sometimes is linked to the liability behind data. Do you have any personal opinions on, you know, with increased data sharing, with increased transparency, as you open your data potentially up to someone else, if somebody makes a decision based on your data, you know, how's that going to be controlled?
I think it's a complicated ecosystem, isn't it? And certainly, you know, we were probably pioneers of fly by the hour as well, in terms of, you know, in terms of buying an engine. You buy basically not analytics, but a service package that is based on the maintenance contract of based on telemetry data. And obviously, you know, you're seeing that now in the likes of people talking about washing machines, through to consumer goods, even through to pay as you go sort of cars, aren't you, as a concept? But you know, but it's also about bringing in other data sets as well, isn't it? You know, not just engine data, for instance, as an example for us. You know, it's bringing in kind of flight routes, flight patterns, actual flight paths that have achieved, through to weather data as well. And it's bringing in other kind of context data as well, isn't it? So I think in terms of context and manufacturing, that's an interesting one. You know, you do have machine tool like manufacturers now offering the similar concept, aren't they? You don't buy a machine, you kind of rent a machine by the hour. I think when you've got scenarios like that, okay, they might be based on cloud-based type platforms, which, you know, offices provide powerful and kind of scalable platforms for those types of industry, or those types of suppliers. But at the end of the day, you want to be in control of your own data. So I think, you know, if you're more forward thinking about your data and your data ownership, that you would, you know, you perhaps might go into a cloud platform yourself as a hypothetical scenario, but you would own that tendency, and you would actually give the information perhaps to the machine manufacturer, as opposed to the data going to their tenancy, if that makes sense. So I think that's probably a reasonable example of kind of data ownership. You know, you might want to take an advantage of not buying a machine and kind of effectively service model type scenario, but you would want to own that data and control that data to that end provider. So, for instance, as an example, but you know, everybody's at different kind of maturity levels, aren't they, in that space? And I think, you know, that type of kind of model is an interesting one, isn't it? From a technology and sort of machine, you know, you've got robotic suppliers, you've got machine suppliers that are kind of looking at my cloud platform, I can give you this XYZ, more than you can get out the raw machine or more robot as plug and play, because you have to have this option, but it has to go to my platform, for instance. And I think, you know, from an end user, you've got to take ownership of kind of your model on that view, because otherwise you could have like maybe 5 or 10 different cloud platforms with data going everywhere, which is not very an integrated approach, isn't it? So, but every factory is slightly different in terms of its landscape of machines and suppliers as well, isn't it? Just as an example. So I think that's probably an interesting challenge.
It's interesting that you bring that back to standards again, and the need for the interoperability of this data to actually derive the greatest value out of it. Ollie, what sort of mechanisms, what sort of technology platforms will we need to handle this data, to move this data, and where are the challenges behind that in today's ecosystem?
Yeah, just looking at it from a process perspective, Rab, you know, you want to be able, all these things to be able to talk to each other You don't want to be working in silos and really, traveling down those trenches of things working independently. So you want to make sure that they can all be integrated, and really start to produce that data from whether it's faster integration of automation or predicting your machine failure rates. You need to understand that all these things need to talk to each other to give and I think Sarah mentioned it earlier, taking that data away from the computer to the edge, and then really analysing that data to understand what's going on with your processes.
Thank you. So one of the things you mentioned there is the application of data to be able to improve the prediction of what's going to happen within your system. So just come back to our very first question, really. How will smart connected manufacturing actually drive UK productivity? Where are the use cases and where can the value really be extracted, perhaps in the short term, but then in the medium and longer terms? Ollie, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll probably just look to our 5G Factory of the Future project to sort of try and answer some of those questions. So we're looking at the factory ecosystem monitoring. So not only taking the environmental data from inside the factory, but outside the factory, and understanding what effect that really has on the process within the facility, rather than controlling the environment to the nth degree, and obviously all the costs associated with that. Smart manufacturing is going to be looking at net carbon zero, trying to drive those costs down. There's going to be higher levels of automation, and then real-time monitoring. So the challenges with the data rates at the minute is trying to get that data out, process it, and then essentially intervene with a machining or a additive manufacturing process in order to predict whether you're going to get a defect in that product, or really just intervene with that process before that happens. So yeah, smart manufacturing is going towards a more modular, a more agile and flexible facility for producing your end products.
Same question to Sarah. As we move into this fourth industrial revolution, or as we continue to move through it, how will this new communications layer, this new ability to move data more quickly with higher reliability, with increased bandwidth, increased security, how will that drive UK productivity, or at least what is BT's perception of that?
So I guess very much aligned to Ollie's view there, Rob. The real value is the amount of insights, real-time monitoring, real-time analytics that happens at the edge that isn't reliant, as has been historically, on significant bandwidth, carrying data back to huge data centres to process and trying to transfer that insight back out in actionable and detailed way. With the ability to operate that level of processing power at the edge, with real-time monitoring, that level of insights readily available to do predictive maintenance, predictive controls, they are the productivity shifts within the manufacturing sector specifically that will really start to drive operational gains and improvements. And as you broaden that out further across your supply chain, if you think of that opportunity to be so agile in your interventions across every aspect of that manufacturing supply chain, with data insights being so readily available, that's really quite a shift from what can be quite significant and cumbersome, processes and interventions in manufacturing as it stands today. I think one of the other interesting things, and there's some great stats that came out from Catherine and Jürgen's talks earlier today for those that joined, is the adoption that we're seeing across the manufacturing insights. So 80% of organisations across manufacturing all believe Industry 4.0 will be a reality before 2025. That's really a material shift across industry that, we don't normally see that level of adoption and buy-in straight away, with technology transformation. So it's evidence that industry-wide, that the benefits that this will drive are widely recognised. And the wider the adoption, the bigger the uptake, the greater the opportunity to benefit from those productivity gains because of the scale that the industry is moving at.
Stephen, following on from what Sarah's just said, the adoption is a challenge, especially within some of the supply chain. And yet I know that you're already working with companies that have been adopting these technologies. Within Rolls-Royce, where do you see the biggest impact on productivity, or where do you expect to see the biggest impact on productivity from the smart connected manufacturing factory and ecosystem actually appear from?
I think it's across all working functions in a factory and manufacturing, and also further afield, isn't it? Really, in terms of the product life cycle. So I think there'll be more data insights into data that's there today in the products, improving products, and increasing performance of products as well. So I think the end product is a key focus area, and particularly when we go into the likes of new sectors like electrification and e-mobility, etc., or even like SMRs, for instance. Where you kind of are on-site factories. You're going to have a different dimension of kind of where into new sectors or that you're collaborating with, which haven't been seen before. So I think it's it's data insights, acting upon that, but then moving on to the next thing as well, isn't it? And as well,
one of the things I always say is that if you can see your data now, you've got insight. If you build up a library of data, you've got hindsight. And by having insight and hindsight layered on each other, hopefully you can get foresight. So that really brings us towards, the closing part of this panel. And really, I just want to start thinking about the future. And Sarah, where do you think smart connected manufacturing will be in 5 years' time?
So I think with many areas that we caveat with the word smart or connected at the start now, Rab, in 5 years' time, it will be BAU. We'll move from smart connected and it will be the standard. We talk about smart connected environments, but as we continue to progress 5G, I saw the talk earlier with regards to what the advent of 6G may be, this will just be the normal. We will have a significant ecosystem across the UK of connected things, and we will expect that to be our mode of operation, and we will, as a UK PLC, be far more comfortable with the movement of data to enrich the products, services, the processes, the customer experiences, and to allow ourselves to be, I love that analogy that you've given, I guess, driven by hindsight and insight, and with the foresight to keep moving forward across industry. So this will be the norm, and we will continue to evolve that concept of connecting things in a smart and intuitive way.
Same question to Ollie.
Yeah, I think as Sarah's mentioned, that evolution of the trust in the data and being more transparent, reaching into your supply chain, bringing the smaller SMEs along with you into a more digitized digital twin environment, understanding not only your processes as they are today, but your as-built models. And understanding basically, the whole holistic view of from raw material to end of use product. So I think the smart connected manufacturing is going to move more forward into understanding your input variables, and I think your network and your connectivity is going to be part of one of your input variables going forward. Is going to be part of your process, as opposed to just something that exists and we use. It's actually going to drive out bottlenecks in your data transfer and all those types of things. And obviously we're going to go to higher levels of automation, more modular and agile facilities, where you can be building one thing on Monday and on Tuesday building something completely different. So I think smart manufacturing in the 5 years' time is going to be a whole different paradigm to what it is today.
Same question to Stephen.
Yeah, and I think it will mean, well, the ultimate end game will be the same for everyone, won't it, as such? But I think everybody will have more accelerated than others. In terms of how they get to that journey. For instance, like small manufacturers might be behind in terms of their investment in this area. And I know there's good initiatives now like Made Smarter in the local regions, trying to promote those digital technologies for smaller companies to accelerate further. So they may miss a couple of steps in terms of going to more the latest technologies and to untap their data, whereas others will be, already kind of well on that journey, and it's taken it to the next level in terms of the technologies they already got, like a platform approach or something. And I think, when we start looking at kind of, look at, not just aerospace, but if you look at just generally in the UK alone, there's a very big drive for electrification, isn't there? So I think that's a big opportunity for a lot of different market sectors and supply chains in automotive, aerospace, and others to, take that kind of, big step forward in to the nth degree, really, of what smart manufacturing cyber physical systems really is.
So as we head towards the closing part of this segment, I just wondered if, Sarah, if you'd like to take the opportunity of just telling us what excites you about smart connected manufacturing.
So for me, Rab, I guess it's looking at the technology layer as opposed to the manufacturing layer, which Stephen and Oliver will far more eloquently cover than myself. It's the opportunity for technology to now be used as a catalyst to really take the manufacturing industry in the UK to the next level. So particularly with the utilisation of 5G and private networks, along with other sort of ubiquitous access layers, this is a real platform for the UK manufacturing industry now over the next 2 to 3 years to really accelerate digital transformation and to take processes, operations and innovation to a new level. And I think, historically, some of the heavy bandwidths that have been required to do the types of things that we've talked about today have probably been more of a prohibitor than an enabler. So the innovation that we're seeing in the technology space in terms of infrastructure becomes very much an enabler and a catalyst for all the things that we're talking about manufacturing. And that for me is really exciting in terms of the role that BT can play in that. I think the final piece as well then is the partnerships that we're seeing emerge, as I think Stephen and Oliver have alluded to, things that we're doing through Worcester Bosch, some of the stuff with AE Aerospace, the MTC in Coventry. It's really great to see BT playing such a significant part in some of those initiatives and partnering with organisations in the sectors from the SMEs through to the larger players to really see how we can, be a catalyst in our own right for some of the great topics that we're seeing across Industry 4.0.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that the high value manufacturing category as a whole is a very cognizant of the needs and the desires and the wants of the ecosystem out there, and also the support that the large companies give to that ecosystem. Ollie, we're collaborating on a 5G program, 5G Factory of the Future, DCMS funded program. And it's quite exciting, isn't it? Can you tell me, why? Why is it exciting to you?
Yeah, it's like you say, Rab, it's really exciting. We've got some large companies, some smaller SMEs, and we're all collaborating towards essentially the industry goal. Really, normally I imagine the high value manufacturing centres and the SMEs would be looking at problems that they believe to be an issue or may become an issue, but we're actually able to collaborate on the topics that we, the issues that we're seeing today and what we foresee as being the issues of the future. We've got a number of use cases that are really sort of pushing the boundaries, the real-time monitoring and closed-loop control, taking a 5-axis machine, really pushing the limits of 5G and the latency to then, like I said, as I mentioned earlier, intervene with the process before there's an error. We're looking at really fast, low latency requirements there. The ecosystem ones, factory eco monitoring is also another really, really interesting topic where we wouldn't normally have probably used meteorological data from external and the environmental data to actually understand what they are doing to our processes. We look at it. We know that there is an issue with the environmental control, and we try and control that as opposed to understanding exactly how that affects the process. And then going into sort of the more, I guess, futuristic, for me, is the augmented and mixed reality. Using that augmented reality to actually look at a product in front of you, understand where the issues are, or even use the you could use it to dial out to your customers, your supply chains, and collaborate on whether these concessions are good to go, or whether you need to do some more rework, rather than the traditional method of emails or driving over and having a big meeting. And these things are all really, really interesting to me as an ex-aircraft fitter, coming from the shop floor, doing all the traditional methods, and then looking at this from a completely futuristic perspective it's a great project to be a part of, and I'm really excited for the coming months really on that.
Definitely looking forward to it. Stephen, you're passionate about smart connected manufacturing. Why?
Oh, I don't know. Every day is a learning day. I think and trying to remain relevant and on top of your subject is a difficult space in this space, and because there's so many domain topics in the smart manufacturing. There's IT, there's security, there's cloud platforms, there's robotics, there's automation. There's such a mass of different technologies if you take it to the nth degree, and I think that's really exciting. As is. Really, that I suppose what gets me excited is kind of how you integrate those technologies successfully into the factory to deliver the business benefit, and also how you actually ensure that you get all the requirements from the business side to ensure it is successful, it meets the requirements, and how you actually achieve that. And that integration is key, really, and that's to me. And it's it depends how you want to call it. Is it OT, IT, OT, or is it just cyber physical systems? I always say if it's also physical side, but if you don't understand the physical side of the process, you can't contextualize how the cyber or digital is going to help the physical to improve and be in control, for instance, and go to the next level. So I think it's exciting in terms of the soft skills as well to it, other than just the technology.
Wow. I think that listening to our panelists, it really struck me that smart connected manufacturing is going to be a huge enabler for UK manufacturing, UK productivity. It's one of those things that is here today, but different companies are at different levels of maturity in terms of being able to adopt some of the systems. But I would also say, there are companies, there are networks out there that can help any manufacturer start on their journey. And there is a Chinese saying: the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is now. And I would say the same for smart connected manufacturing. If you haven't started your journey, do it today. To close off, just go around our panelists to see if they've got any closing remarks they'd like to make. Sarah.
Rob, thank you for hosting the panel, and I think I would echo your final sentiment. Organisations such as us in BT are very passionate about making a difference to this industry and this sector, hence the event that we're running over the course of these 3 days. I think what puts a lot of people off is not knowing where to start. So make that first call, start the journey, reach out to organisations who may have the expertise that you're not clear on. But you said it very eloquently, Rob, and now's the time to start if you haven't already.
Stephen.
No, I'll just echo yourself and Sarah's comments really. But I think it's everybody to really understand what's the vision and how they're going to get to that vision. Both using understanding the technology options, the real requirements, business requirements for OT/IT, for instance, and also standards. Where do they fit in? Where can they make things uneventful in that process as well for interoperability?
Holly.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Rob. Like I say, the upskill or the reskill of people and all these new technologies, it's really exciting field at the moment. So it's really looking really positive for the future of manufacturing. And like I say, it's really exciting to be a part of this evolution. So yeah, thanks.
Well, Sarah Walker of BT, Oliver Swift of BAE Systems, and Stephen Carter of Rolls-Royce, thank you for your time today. You've been listening and taking part in the Smart Connected Manufacturing Conference presented by the Tommy Flowers Network. Mike.
Great, everybody. Thank you very much for that. Rab, Ollie, Steve, Sarah, thank you. There were some amazing insights in that from the whole digital manufacturing construct. And I think if you haven't watched this session, or you've already watched it once, I'd go back and watch this again. There were some real nuggets of information in there. So just a reminder, this brings us a close to today's session. We are back on air tomorrow at 9:45. Once again, another stellar group of speakers and a panel discussion. We have representation from 5G Works, as well as the High Value Manufacturing Center, the National Composite Center. Rab will be back tomorrow from the AMRC, as well as we have the CEO from Make UK as well. So another pretty heavyweight panel of discussions and presentations for tomorrow. So thank you all for participating in today, and hopefully we'll see you all again tomorrow at 9:45. Thank you very much.